Hey ratepayers, it's Eric Lippman from Utility Reform Now. If you've been watching a couple of these videos, I'm sure there are folks out there who are thinking, Lippman, your critiques of the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission's kind of harsh. How do we know that you're right and they're wrong? You've never run a public utility. Why should we listen to you? It's a great question. It's something I've thought about a lot. It's absolutely true. I could never, ever, in 1,000 years, run a public utility, or at least run it well. But after 35 years as a lawyer, since law school, and 4 years as a legislator in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and 19 years as a judge, I can do one thing, and that's read a statute. And so that's where I went. And helpfully, really helpfully, the Minnesota Legislature, when it set up the system for regulating utility rates here in the state of Minnesota, it set out its purposes. Really great that the legislature did that in this case. And so the very first words of the Minnesota Public Utilities Act, now at 216B, Chapter 216B, it sets out what the legislature had in mind by rate regulation, by regulating what utilities can charge and how they charge. And the legislature says we have 4 questions we want to answer when reviewing a proposal to increase rates. We have 4 questions we're interested in and that we want to answer. So what are those 4 questions? 1, will the rates that are proposed by the utility result in adequate and reliable service? Great, that's absolutely what we want to know. 2, are the rates that are proposed in the utilities applications consistent with the financial and economic requirements that are common among public utilities? We want to reimburse costs that are regularly familiar in the field of providing either natural gas or electricity service. And that's a synonym, I think, for reasonableness, which is, if other utilities are doing it, probably within the zone of reasonableness for Minnesota utilities to be doing it. Also, third, whether the rates are consistent with the need for the utility to construct new facilities or to obtain energy supplies. So again, in the case of Greater Minnesota Gas or another natural gas utility, the utility has need to make new pipelines in order to reach new customers. That's constructing facilities. And also to buy, perhaps on the wholesale spot market, supplies of natural gas that it will run through its pipelines to its customers. So the utilities need to construct facilities and obtain energy supplies. Commonplace business practice for utilities. And last, and perhaps most important, avoiding unnecessary duplication of facilities. We don't want to overbuild the pipelines for a natural gas utility. We don't want too many transmission wires or substations that we don't need for electricity utility. We want to just have the reasonable costs. We want to have the necessary costs and not much more, okay? And if the proposal of the utility is reasonable on all of these grounds, I think the expectation should be that proposal would be approved. But that's not what we're doing at the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. I'll get to that point in a second. There's one other thing that I do want to emphasize, but in order to do that, I need a new slide. So, again, we're taking our statute 216B01, and what it wants is adequate service, reliable service, and fund the commonplace expenses that a utility faces and avoid duplication. That's what the 4 questions are in 216B01 that the legislature hopes that the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission will answer when it gets a new rate application. Interestingly enough, it's exactly what ratepayers and ordinary consumers of electricity service and natural gas service also want. As part of the rate-making process, For those 19 years that I was a judge, I was involved in the review of rate-making applications, and we would have public hearings and hear from folks just like you about the proposal to raise your electricity rates or your natural gas rates. We would invite the public to come and tell us what they thought about the service and about the proposed increases and any other thing that they wanted to talk about related to the utility service. And people did show up. It has been my experience that consumers, ordinary consumers, talk about one of 5 things. They want safety in the delivery of the service. When you turn on the light at the wall switch, you don't want to get a shock. You don't want transmission wires just lying in the street. You don't want a natural gas pipeline to spring a leak or to explode. You want to make sure that for members of the public, for ratepayers, and particularly for the utility workers themselves, you want the utility to run a safe operation. Secondly, people want to have access to the service. And while we've been really good at electrification of most of Minnesota, most Minnesotans have access to electricity service, that's not the case with natural gas service. Not everybody has access to reliable and affordable natural gas service to their home. Me personally, I think that that's an issue, but that's something that ratepayers talk about. They also want reliable service. When you go to the wall switch and flick the switch, you want to make sure that pretty regularly, almost always, the lights in fact go on. And you can count on the gas stove to turn on and your other appliances to be running as they should with a reliable service, either of natural gas or electricity, as the case may be. On those rare occasions when utility service goes out, we want the utility to be responsive. We want low times of outages and failures. So you need safety technicians and engineers and linemen in order to restore a service that has been knocked out through weather delay or some other mishap. We want a service that's responsive. And last, and perhaps most importantly, we want stable prices. This is what consumers say when they come and tell administrative law judges what they think about utility service here in Minnesota. Case after case, year after year, they're talking about these 5 things. Interestingly enough, that's absolutely what the legislature is talking about in 216B. It lines up 1-to-1. Safe service is an adequate service. An accessible service is an adequate service. Obviously, a reliable service is a reliable service. A responsive service is an adequate service in the view of the legislature, and stable prices mean that we're going to fund the things that utilities commonly do, but we're going to avoid litigation. We're going to have significant cost controls. The other great thing about this is that it completely lines up with our goalposts and our constitutional requirements in this area. A safe service means we haven't undercut the utility and it's not a Fifth Amendment taking. An accessible service means there's enough resources that it's not a Fifth Amendment taking. A reliable service that works dependably means that we're not undercutting the utilities' revenue stream. It's not a Fifth Amendment taking. A utility that has enough resources to be responsive in order to provide adequate service is not a Fifth Amendment taking. So it lines up perfectly with our constitutional boundary and the goalpost here. Also, if we're only, and we're principally focusing on commonplace expenses for utilities and not having duplication, we're not gouging. It's right in the sweet spot. What consumers want, what the legislature told us to do, and what the Constitution requires. It's unbelievable that it magically, maybe perhaps not so magically, lines up perfectly. Now there's one last point I want to get to, but as it happens, I need yet another slide. The commissioners are not CEOs of public utilities. As I've said in a bunch of other videos before, 4 of the 5 members of the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission have never worked a day in their life for a public utility. If they went out for the job to run Xcel Energy or CenterPoint Gas or Northern, or any other public utility, rate-regulated utility that operates in Minnesota, they likely would not get the job. Okay, they just don't have the background and experience to run a public utility. Thankfully, that's not what the Minnesota Legislature asked the Commission to do. In the case of their spending and their expense proposals, the statute says we want to fund the utilities' ordinary expenses. What do utilities ordinarily do? Now, it may well be that the MPUC commissioners, would in fact fund the ordinary utility expenses if they were the CEO of the company. I suspect they would. So the Venn diagrams, they cross here in the middle. But too much of the focus of the rate-making proceeding is on what the commissioners would do if they were running the utility over here, and not what the statute says to do, which is this a commonplace and regular practice amongst utilities? If so, you should probably fund it. Okay? The boundary is what the industry does regularly, over and over again, across the country, in Wisconsin, in North Dakota, in Iowa, not what the folks who are on the commission would do if they were CEO, if they were running operations. Again, none of the 5 commissioners, even the one who had worked for CenterPoint for a time, has ever been in the C-suite, has ever been the president or the CEO of a natural gas utility. We didn't hire them to run all of the utilities, let alone one utility in Minnesota. The job is different. And if you want to focus Minnesota Public Utility Commission members and this system of rate making on the job it should be doing, I'm asking you that you like, follow, and subscribe at utilityreformnow.com. utilityreformnow.com.